They thought it would be a whisper, something small, calculated, maybe even symbolic. A few rockets in the desert, a stern press release, some chest, thumping for the home crowd. That's what world leaders told themselves when the first rumblings of Iran's response began. But what came instead was thunder. It came not just with fire and steel, but with precision, confidence, and the kind of intent that doesn't ask permission. It was not about chaos. It was about control. And when it hit, it didn't just shake the region. It rattled the whole damn globe. See, when the powerful act, they expect the response to be manageable, to fit within the script. But Iran didn't follow the script this time. They flipped it. They took the playbook, tore it in half, and wrote their own version. Live in front of the world, and the shock didn't come from the size of the retaliation alone. It came from the fact that it was bigger, smarter, and far more organized than anyone had expected. Intelligence agencies were blindsided. Military analysts were caught flat-footed. Politicians, once puffed up with confidence, sat back in stunned silence as breaking news alerts flooded every screen. The problem isn't just what Iran did, it's what it meant. Because this wasn't a wild punch thrown out of anger. No, this was calculated, it was cold, it was deliberate. Every target, every message, every timing cue, it all said the same thing: we are not afraid of you. And you can believe that echoed in boardrooms and bunkers from Washington to Tel Aviv, from London to Brussels. The message was loud, and it hit harder than any weapon ever could. Leaders around the world, those who believed they held all the cards, found themselves playing defense. The panic didn't come from one explosion or a number on a casualty report. It came from the realization that something had changed. Iran had reached beyond rhetoric, beyond regional tension, and touched the untouchable, global confidence. They exposed a crack in the armor of assumption, and when one crack shows, many more follow. But this panic, this rush to understand, to catch up, to re-strategize, is not new. It's what happens when power is assumed, not earned. When you believe that others will always stay quiet, always play small, you stop listening. You stop preparing. And when that silence turns into action, you don't hear the warning signs until the ground is already shaking beneath you. Now some will call it aggression, some will call it a provocation, but the truth is, what we saw was retaliation. For years of pressure, sanctions, threats, and strikes, this was not the opening move. It was the reply, and a reply that big, that bold, sends a signal not just to enemies, but to allies fence, sitters and silent watchers all across the map. Iran is not standing in the corner anymore. This wasn't chaos. It was clarity. This wasn't desperation. It was declaration. And now, as panic settles into the minds of world leaders, they're realizing they miscalculated not just the action, but the spirit behind it. They thought this would be a whisper in the dark, but it roared. It roared in cities and headlines, in war rooms and market crashes. It roared in the eyes of every leader forced to rethink what they thought they knew. Because the moment power starts underestimating resolve, it loses its grip. And once fear creeps into the hands of those who once felt untouchable, everything changes. While the missiles struck with deadly force, the real explosion happened behind the scenes. Behind thick wooden doors, inside rooms lined with flags and national seals, leaders who once walked tall were suddenly sitting still, staring at intel screens and blinking harder than they had in years. The retaliation had come and gone, but it left something far more dangerous in its wake. Panic, not on the streets, not among the people. No, this panic lived high up, where polished shoes tread carefully and polished words are written in measured tones. The kind of panic that doesn't scream, it whispers, urgently, in crisis meetings and late night calls, because for the first time in a long time, those in power had to admit they didn't see this coming. Iran's response wasn't just larger than expected. It was layered. It was the kind of move that had planning behind it, timing, coordination, not the act of a nation lashing out blindly, but one that had watched, waited, and chosen its moment with intent. And that's what scared them, because world leaders aren't just afraid of missiles. They're afraid of unpredictability wrapped in competence, the kind of action that doesn't just retaliate, but sends a message so strong, so undeniable, it silences even the loudest critics, for a moment at least. As the dust settled, the reality became clearer. Iran had shifted the tone of the entire conversation. The West had been playing chess, assuming the opponent would stick to checkers. But now every analyst, every diplomat, every military strategist was forced to pull their playbooks off the shelves and start again. This wasn't just an escalation, it was a recalibration. And in that recalibration, a question echoed loud. If this is what they were holding back, what else are they capable of? Because this wasn't just about physical retaliation. It was a signal to the world. There's power here, and it's not begging for permission to show itself. The retaliation spoke not only to adversaries, but to allies as well, those who might have thought Iran was isolated, on the ropes, or incapable of mounting such a calculated strike. Suddenly, assumptions cracked, and in that crack, the cold air of fear rushed in. And here's the thing, this move wasn't only aimed outward, it was internal too. To the people of Iran, this wasn't just revenge, it was pride. It was proof that their nation could strike back, not with chaos, but with control. And that message, beamed across every screen, shouted through every social feed, ignited a fire at home. Because when a country that's long been painted into a corner shows its claws and holds steady, its people feel something powerful, dignity. World leaders didn't just see a military strike. They saw the return of narrative power. Iran wasn't reacting, it was directing. And when a so-called pariah nation grabs hold of the narrative, reshapes it, and flings it back at the global community with boldness, the response is panic, not because of the attack itself, but because of what it represents. What it represents is a shift in power, in perception, in control, and the panic in those leadership circles comes not just from surprise, but from the understanding that this kind of move changes everything. The rules don't feel so fixed anymore. The old assumptions don't seem so solid. The world stage, once thought to be predictable, suddenly feels like a place where anything can happen, and no one, not even the most powerful, can write the ending alone. Now they know. The streets might still be calm for now, but behind closed doors, the panic is real. This wasn't just missiles in the air or fire on the ground. No, what Iran launched was something far deeper than a weapon. It was a message, and that message didn't need translation. It was direct, deliberate, and loud enough to be heard in every capital around the globe. You see, retaliation is one thing. Retaliation with clarity, with precision, with purpose. That's a whole different story. Because when a nation chooses not to act out of rage, but out of resolve, when it strikes not just to destroy, but to declare, the impact doesn't end at the blast site. It lingers, it speaks, it warns. The world had grown comfortable with a certain script. Iran protests, leaders condemn, threats are exchanged, and then it dies down. Same cycle, different week. But not this time. This time, the response was designed not to provoke, but to prove a point. Iran wasn't asking for attention. It was demanding recognition. The strike wasn't meant to start a war. It was meant to show that the war was already happening. Only now, Iran was choosing when and how to engage. And make no mistake, that rattled every strategist watching from the sidelines, because what rattled them most wasn't just the action. It was the meaning behind it. Each target wasn't random. Each moment was timed. And every piece of that operation screamed of strategy, not desperation. That's what changes the game. That's what makes allies worry and enemies rethink. When you expect chaos and receive discipline instead, it forces a recalibration of everything you thought you knew. The symbolism of this response couldn't be ignored. Iran made it clear this wasn't revenge for a headline. It was years of pressure, of sanctions, of military intrusions, answered with a move that declared, "We've had enough." It was less about who was hit and more about what it represented. Control, capability, confidence, and that's why this retaliation carried more weight than just the damage it caused. It was calculated theater, performed on the global stage, and every leader in the audience understood what they were watching. For too long, the West has assumed Iran would always respond within limits, measured, contained, predictable. But that assumption has now been shattered. And with that shattering came something far more dangerous than weapons: doubt. Doubt in old alliances, doubt in deterrence, doubt in the idea that one side controls the flow of events. Because when a country starts to choose its own timing, its own targets, and does it with boldness and purpose, the world notices. And it reconsiders. This wasn't just a statement to enemies. It was a declaration to the region, to the allies watching closely, to the rivals circling the same conflicts. Iran was saying, we're no longer reacting, we're asserting. And in that assertion, new rules were written. And the panic setting in among global leaders isn't just because of what was hit. It's because of what they know now. Iran's silence was never weakness. It was patience, and patience, when paired with precision, becomes power. What happened on that day wasn't a scream. It was a cold, clear sentence that cut through the noise. A message broadcast not just in fire, but in strategy. And now that the message has been received, the question haunting every leader's mind isn't just about what comes next. It's about whether they ever truly understood who they were dealing with in the first place. The world felt it, not in the form of tremors or sirens, but in something far more unsettling: the shift. That subtle but undeniable tilt in the global balance of power. You could feel it in the voices of news anchors, in the rapid fire responses from defense ministries, in the way stock markets dipped and diplomats stumbled over their words. Something had changed. And it wasn't just about Iran firing back. It was about how they did it, why they did it, and what it revealed. This wasn't the act of a rogue state lashing out in a last-ditch fit of rage. No, this was a message crafted with intent, delivered with confidence, and executed with surgical precision. And that message said, we're not playing the same game anymore. World leaders, for years, operated under the illusion that Iran's power was limited, that its military capabilities were constrained, its regional influence boxed in. They believed that sanctions had crippled it, that isolation had silenced it, that surveillance had mapped every move before it could happen. But when Iran retaliated, and retaliated with the kind of clarity and force that exposed gaps in the world's defenses, those illusions shattered. The world realized they weren't dealing with the same Iran they had grown used to ignoring or underestimating. This shift in perception is more powerful than any missile. It changes everything. Because when the so-called underdog demonstrates not just strength, but strategic maturity, the psychological advantage flips. Suddenly, the ones who were once calm are now cautious. The ones who once dictated the terms are now reevaluating their approach. That's the real shift. That's the tremor that keeps leaders up at night, and it wasn't just the West that noticed. Regional players, nations that had long taken comfort in the idea that Iran would stay reactive, limited, are now watching more closely. The retaliation wasn't just a strike on foreign targets. It was a strike at the narrative, the story that said power flows in one direction, from west to east, from big to small, from loud to quiet. Iran reversed that current, if only for a moment, and that moment was long enough to send everyone back to their war rooms with red pens, rewriting their assumptions. Now, this isn't about celebrating aggression. It's about recognizing what that aggression uncovered, a new equation, one where Iran isn't just a cautionary footnote in global strategy. It's a bold, central player, a nation willing to draw lines, cross thresholds, and take consequences head on. That kind of resolve is hard to fight, because it doesn't flinch, it doesn't blink, it doesn't ask to be included. It declares that it already is. And let's not ignore the symbolic victory either. In the eyes of its own people, and in the minds of those watching from similar positions across the world, I'm talking about nations feeling bullied, sidelined, sanctioned, pushed into corners. This move became a statement of possibility. That even under pressure, even when boxed in, it's still possible to punch through. That's what makes this retaliation so much more than a military move. It's a moment that says the global order is not as fixed as it seems. Power doesn't just reside in wealth or nuclear arsenals. It resides in perception, in timing, in audacity. And on that day, Iran held all three. That's what sent the shockwaves. Not just the boom on the ground, but the echo in the minds of decision makers around the world. The world saw the balance shift, and that shift cannot be undone. When the missiles hit and the headlines exploded, it wasn't just governments that were watching. It was the world. Millions of eyes glued to screens. Social media lit up like a wildfire. People weren't just witnessing retaliation. They were witnessing a reckoning. And that's what made this moment more than military. It became global. Because Iran didn't just strike back, it commanded attention. It forced people to look, to listen, to wake up. The old narratives, the stale assumptions, the convenient silences, this retaliation shattered them all in an instant. The world, whether it wanted to or not, had to pay attention. For too long, the conflict had become background noise. A drone strike here, a proxy clash there, diplomats talking circles at microphones while the public tuned out. But this was different. This was big. It was sharp. It was precise. And it pierced through the haze of global indifference. Suddenly, Iran wasn't just a headline. It wasn't just a debate point. It was a force making itself impossible to ignore. And in doing so, it jolted the world awake. Not just leaders, but citizens. Not just analysts, but everyday people who felt the ripple in real time. And that's the thing. This retaliation wasn't only about the battlefield. It was about the narrative, because when people see a country once seen as isolated, beaten down, defiant yet cornered, when they see that country strike with discipline and strategy, it challenges the entire story they've been told. The media machine that painted Iran as desperate now had to explain coordination. The governments that promised containment now had to explain how this got through. And that's where the real panic begins, not just in the strike itself, but in the realization that the truth has shifted, that the story doesn't fit in the box anymore. Iran's move also exposed the fragility of international confidence. People began asking questions. If they could do that, what else are they capable of? If intelligence agencies didn't see this coming, what are they missing next? The retaliation didn't just destroy infrastructure. It cracked open doubt. Doubt in intelligence, in security systems, in leadership. And in a world already fatigued by misinformation and uncertainty, that kind of doubt spreads fast. But there's more to it, because for nations around the world, especially those under pressure, under sanctions, under threat, Iran's move was more than a message. It was a model, a signal that you don't have to sit down, that you can act, you can push back, you can stand on your own terms. That is dangerous, the status quo, to those who built the rules and expect everyone to follow them. because the moment one nation breaks that expectation and survives it, others start thinking about their own playbooks. That's how change begins, not in boardrooms, but in bold moves that inspire rethinking, even rebellion. The people felt it too. In the streets of Tehran, there was pride. In cafes in Beirut, in parlors in Damascus, in quiet corners of countries feeling similarly boxed in. There was a shift in posture, in tone, not loud, not yet, but there, that hum of possibility, that maybe the world isn't as immovable as it pretends to be. That maybe power can be challenged, if it's done with precision and purpose. That maybe silence isn't the only option left. And now, the world has to live with that reality. The moment has already happened. The eyes have already opened. The myth of control has already cracked. Iran didn't just retaliate. It revealed something. And once it's revealed, it can't be hidden again. Some moments in history don't come with warning shots. They arrive like thunder, not because they're the start of something new, but because they finally expose what's been boiling beneath the surface all along. That's what this retaliation did. It didn't just shake global security. It exposed its illusion. For years, powerful nations believed they had engineered a system too vast, too interconnected, too advanced to fail. But when Iran struck with precision, confidence, and coordination, that system flinched. And in that flinch, the world saw the truth. The foundation wasn't as stable as we'd all been told. This wasn't just a strike. It was a stress test. And what it revealed was that global security, as we know it, is not invincible. It's layered in complexity, yes. It's reinforced by alliances, yes. But it's also built on assumptions. Assumptions that certain countries wouldn't dare, wouldn't reach, wouldn't push back too hard. Those assumptions died the moment retaliation fell from the sky. Iran didn't just hit targets. It hit the heart of complacency, and when complacency takes a hit, panic follows. The international order has been carefully crafted like a chessboard. Everyone knows where the pieces go, what roles they're supposed to play, how far they're allowed to move. But Iran stepped off that board. It didn't follow the script of expected behaviors, and in doing so, it forced the rest of the world to confront a difficult reality. When a player ignores the rules, the game changes. The carefully balanced structure that's supposed to hold the world together, it doesn't know how to react when someone refuses to play their part. World leaders weren't just alarmed by the damage. They were alarmed by the precision. The competence, the control, because chaos you can predict. But clarity makes you nervous. It means this wasn't a lucky shot. It wasn't a fluke. It was the result of planning, investment, and long-term intent. And if Iran can pull off something this significant, under sanctions, under pressure, under the weight of global isolation, what does that say about the strength of global security itself? The systems that are supposed to warn us didn't. The alliances that are supposed to deter this kind of response didn't. The intelligence that's supposed to see it coming didn't. And so, the world is now reckoning with more than just an unexpected attack. It's reckoning with the understanding that the so-called architecture of safety might be more fragile than ever. It's not just about military capability anymore. It's about unpredictability in an age of digital warfare, proxy conflicts, and shifting alliances. Iran's retaliation was not just a flare-up. It was a blueprint. It showed that power no longer belongs only to those with the most money, the biggest bombs, or the longest list of allies. It belongs to those who are willing to act boldly, to break the mold, to step outside of predictable behavior, and survive. That idea doesn't just threaten countries. It threatens the entire framework of global deterrence. So now, as leaders meet behind closed doors, as press conferences scramble to control the narrative, and as global markets twitch in response to every new headline, the question isn't just what will Iran do next. The real question is, who else was watching? Because this wasn't just a retaliation. It was a signal, a warning that the balance is shifting, the system is vulnerable, and the idea of security we've all trusted in may no longer be secure at all. And once that idea is broken, no system can ever return to what it was.